Welcome back to Rhythm of Justice. I'm your host, Salim Adolfo. We are here for part 2 with the DC Young Democrats. We're going to be talking politics with Zach Israel, National Committeeman, and Sheikah Reed, National Committee Woman. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Rhythm of Justice. I'm your host, Salim Adolfo. We are here with DC Young Democrats National Committee Man and National Committee Woman, Mr. Zach Israel and Ms. Sheikah Reed. Zach, tell us where you're from.
Yeah, so I grew up in central New Jersey in a town called Franklin Township.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, raised in New Jersey, and then I went to college in upstate New York, Bard College, and moved down to DC about 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And where are you from, Ms. Sheikah?
I'm a third-generation Washingtonian,
Okay.
born and raised in D.C. Went to Howard University. When I first graduated from high school, I went to school in Miami, realized how much I missed D.C. and its history and culture and politics. So then I came back and found that Howard just called my name, and yeah, now I'm here.
What led you to become part of the DC Young Dems?
Originally, I saw that my friend Kevin Chavis was running for president, and so that really that put it on my radar, and I went to a lot of events. But after I ran for city council for Ward 1, I had a lot of young people who were energized, who were excited about getting involved in politics locally and wanted an outlet, especially in light of the 2016 election. And so I was just really excited about having an opportunity to continue that political engagement and excite other young people about how to be involved in DC.
What led you to run for city council?
So many reasons. When I was a little girl, my parents were really close to Marion Barry, and so I got to see how people who organize and can collectively come to realize what's going on in their communities can be really impactful. And so a lot of people in my community saw that I had a campaign around how expensive speeding and parking tickets are in DC, and everyone hates speeding and parking tickets. So people started to actually organize a campaign for me, and so I refused to run at first. And then they'd raised a little bit of money, they'd gotten some great people to get behind me, and so when it made sense, then I decided to run. And
what did you learn from that experience?
I mean, I really could, you could just have an episode on that alone. I learned that DC really functions when people decide to get engaged and involved. And I think a lot of times people don't get involved in elections because they don't know just how impactful they can be. So, you know, whether it's, you know, you have a bunch of friends who you can get together and have a little meet and greet, or, you know, raise any funds at all of it really matters. And so I realized just what that impact can look like on a hyper local level and on a macro level when you're really willing to, you know, take that step and you know, organize people around an issue that you really care about and bring it to a candidate and say, hey, we'll raise, you know, so many thousands of dollars for you because we care about, you know, our children getting gunned down in our community. And so there are just I learned so much, and I learned that so many people don't know anything about campaigns or local politics, and just how unengaged a lot of our young people are.
Would you do it again?
I would do it again, maybe not the same office, but I definitely would. I think that there's still a lot of engagement that we need to see in our community that we don't, and that's something I'm really passionate about.
Now, Zach, you're a national committeeman, correct?
Yes.
What is your role as national committeeman?
So my position, as well as Sheikah's position as National Committee Woman, is to represent all of DC's Young Democrats at the national level. So there's an organization called the Young Democrats of America, or the YDA, and there's chapters in all 50 states, the district, and the territories. And we have a convention every 2 years. So the one coming up is in July of this year. And it's a forum and a platform for younger Democrats specifically to focus on issues that impact young people, what we want the Democratic Party to look like in response to those needs, those wishes, that vision. And so from the DC perspective, one of our number one priorities is DC statehood and elevating that to a national level with our young counterparts in all 50 states, because as you're aware, a lot of folks around the country have no idea about our plight not being a state. And so just educating people and having them put political pressure on their Democratic leaders is really important.
Well, why is statehood important for the residents of District of Columbia?
Well, it's really vital because at a fundamental level, it's just simply unfair that we have 700,000 people, the vast majority of whom are adults that pay federal taxes, and yet we don't have any representation. We're the only Western liberal democracy where the residents of the nation's capital are disenfranchised at the national level. And we have people that fought in wars, fought for this country, that live in D.C. and don't have a say in how members of Congress vote on matters of war, for instance, or any other type of public policy. So at that level, we just simply deserve a vote. And then on many practical issues, because we're not a state, the United States Congress has ultimate authority over bills that our local council and mayor pass and sign into law. They essentially can veto what the people of the district want, and that's simply uncalled for and not necessary in 2019. So
let's back up for a second, because you said something that I think is important that many people that live outside of the district may not know. Does the DC City Council and Mayor pass legislation for the residents and that's it, or does the things that they do have to be approved by Congress?
So there is a 30-day congressional review period is what it's called,
Okay.
and so it's used rarely, but if Congress really wanted to, they could say, hold on, we don't like what your local government has done in this instance, in this bill, if it's a more controversial social issue, for instance, and they can just put a pause on it and pass a bill nullifying that law from becoming law.
Wow.
So.
But also with our budget, I mean, we have some of the brightest minds in this country who put a lot of thought and effort into carefully crafting our city's budget, and it can be vetoed by our Congressional Oversight Review Board. And so people who don't spend any time in DC get to make decisions about how our funds and our tax dollars are allocated. And so it really does take away the power and I think a lot of the dignity of a lot of our elected officials here.
All right, we need to take a break. We're going to come back and touch on that, especially the budget part. You're watching Rhythm of Justice Television. I'm your host, Salim Adolfo, and we are here talking politics with the DC Young Democrats. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Rhythm of Justice Television. We are talking politics with DC Young Democrats. We have National Committee women and National Committee men here on the show. Ms. Reed, right before the break, we were talking about the budget here and how the local government approves the budget, put all that time, energy, and effort into it. However, at the national level, it can still be disapproved.
Yes.
And so my question is, and I want to try to educate the viewing audience as much as possible, what is the relationship between the local government in the District of Columbia, the federal government, and then what kind of impact can people across the country have? If Congress can veto something here, if I got friends in Minnesota or Texas, can I go to them and say, hey, we need you all to write people at your federal level and tell them to make a decision?
Not only can you call your friends in Minnesota, you should call your friends in Minnesota, because we need people to get involved, because these are really challenging times for us as a country, and I think the more people who are involved, the better. But around DC statehood specifically, we've seen a change in tides with the legislation for DC statehood. We've seen a lot of high-ranking Democrats have been excited about DC statehood, and this is something that I don't think we've seen in, at least since I've been alive, almost 30 years now, 28 to be exact. But I mean, we're seeing those tides change, but we do have a Congressional Review Board, which is, I know that there's a congressman from California, I believe Pennsylvania, and do you know the other states?
Blanking on the other states.
But I mean, people who aren't in DC who are making decisions about that really impact us.
Yeah, and to get to your point about other states, I mean, the reality is, in terms of the relationship between the local government and the federal government, in terms of our criminal justice system, to give you an example, A lot of the criminal prosecution goes through the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, and if you get sentenced, or if you're you're waiting trial, for instance, you can get sent to a federal prison 500 miles away.
Correct.
While
And
you're
your family
waiting.
members in D.C. may not be able to afford to go all the way out in the middle of the country, and we know that that's a really important time to have that support from your family and friends. So at a very practical level, there's really serious consequences from not being a state and having our own path, if you will.
Kind of want to switch gears a little bit. In the first part with the DC Young Democrats, one of the things we were talking about was voter engagement. And one of the things I was thinking was that oftentimes people get disillusioned. They get, what's the word I'm really looking for here? They get just fed up. And they get frustrated with the system when it doesn't work. And like many towns, DC's had its shares of scandals. How do you feel as those scandals impact people's willingness to engage in the political process?
I think it like you were saying, I think it disheartens a lot of people, and it sends a message, if not dealt with appropriately, that our government doesn't take this very seriously. And so in order to prevent that kind of approach moving forward, we need to take it seriously and have appropriate punishments for these scandals, and say this type of activity isn't okay, to restore that public trust, because it's already too low. We need to increase that level of civic engagement and not worsen it by letting these types of things just sort of get swept under the rug.
I think what's exciting, though, is within our political climate, I think that young people feel more empowered and feel like they have voices more than I think I've seen within recent years. And so it's, I've seen, there's been this kind of, there was this wave of young people running for office in 2016, 2017. And so you're seeing younger people who not only are running for office because they feel like something needs to change because we're seeing so much, so many scandals, but I think also we're seeing their friends getting engaged, we're seeing their families getting engaged. And so there's this kind of movement, I think, that I think is our responsibility to tap into and to make sure that people do feel engaged. And like, not only are you engaged, but you have an outlet that is invested in hearing your voice. And so, for the DC Young Dems, we do target that 18 to 35 demographic, but that doesn't mean that there aren't caucuses within the Democratic State Committee where people can be engaged and involved. And so many nonprofits and organizations that do amazing work that people can also, use as their as avenues to be politically engaged.
So what role do you think social media can play in getting more young people engaged, especially since this is the DC Young Democrats?
Well, I think that when it comes to local government, for instance, there's a lot of hearings and other things that are not the sexiest issues, but have really important impacts. And again, I think what was mentioned earlier in the program, that people are really busy in their day-to-day lives. They don't necessarily have the time to be as involved, and so that's where we can step in and utilize social media to bring attention to things that might not get the attention it merits. And so that's really one major way of getting that across.
Yeah, but I think it's so cool that right now, Elizabeth Warren can, when she was blocked out of the the chambers, she wasn't allowed to be able to come in, but she was able to do a Facebook Live right there and speak directly to, her supporters and to America. And so I think it's cool to be able to see politicians who have historically been more elusive be able to, you have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez literally texting from the congressional chambers talking about ways that hearings are held and kind of pulling back the curtains. So I think it's exciting. I think there's so many ways that people can be engaged, whether, to have politicians being able to post a poll and in real time be able to see how their constituents feel about a topic is something that we haven't really been able to see in history, but it's something that that are things that we're getting to see now. And I think that it's a great tool, and I'm excited to see how politicians will take up that responsibility moving forward, and hopefully that'll build more trust between constituents and their political leaders.
In the district, there's opportunity to lower the voting age. How do you feel about that?
I think that, we need to make sure that we're very calculated and meticulous about it. I don't think that it's something to be taken lightly on the surface. It seems like a great idea. Let's engage more young people in the political process. But I do think that there are nuances to that legislation. And I think that, we should have a feasibility study and have some data brought to the table and really be tangible about, the reasons why this is really good. But I think that it's great to see young people excited about having the right to vote. I mean, when I was young, I was mostly focused on getting my learner's permit. So,
right.
Seeing that excitement's cool.
What do you think?
Yeah, so in my personal opinion, I think 16, 17-year-olds should have the right to vote in the district. A lot of them are holding down jobs, they're paying taxes, they're in the school system in the district, and so decisions that our elected officials make impact their lives. And so I feel like a lot of our younger people in that age bracket might be even better educated voters than adults that are much older. And so there's other local governments nearby, Tacoma Park, Maryland, and Hyattsville, Maryland, that have already lowered the voting age, and the sky hasn't fallen. And in fact, I think it's made their communities even more civically engaged. So,
well, I think that oftentimes political things are popularity contests, and so I firmly believe that an election is a popularity contest for the most part. If you got enough money, you got enough people that like you, you can win. We don't always elect the person who is the best critical thinker, who has the best policies. So if we're lowering the age, at what age is going to be too low? Because if we lower it to 16, why not 15? And then if you got enough 16, 17-year-olds that are popular on Snapchat, Instagram, next thing you know, that person can get in office.
I think that's a slippery slope to be able to make that, to say that that's the largest concern, because the largest voting demographic is actually seniors. And so, young people don't really show up to the polls. It's just, the data shows that over time consistently. That's why you have politicians busing seniors from senior centers to the polls, because a lot of times they've been more politically engaged over time. They've been better informed over time. They've had, they have the time to keep track of who's running for office and know who's actually been beneficial to them as individuals. So I think that if we're seeing young people on Snapchat getting other young people to the polls, that would be exciting. And it would force our local elected officials to take the needs and concerns of younger people more seriously, whether it's gun violence and their educational system in a way that they aren't in many respects, because they can't vote, and so I don't have to necessarily hear their concerns or care as much about them. And so I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing if they became a voting bloc, and I think they can make smart decisions, and they would treat this seriously if given that opportunity.
All right, we need to take a break. You're watching Rhythm of Justice Television. I'm your host, Salim Adolfo. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Rhythm of Justice Television. I'm your host, Salim Adolfo. We're here with part 2 of the DC Young Democrats. We're talking politics with the National Committeeman, Zach Israel, and National Committeewoman, Sheikah Reed. What are some of the things that you think are the most important issues for young people locally and nationally right now?
So, I think we've seen a spike in gun violence locally, and that's something that there have been some national models around ways to reduce. So I'm excited about putting some of those tactics, proposing some of those tactics to council members and encouraging council members to support, fund, and implement the NEAR Act. DC statehood is our #1 priority, making sure that we're engaged with the 2020 election and putting the issues that impact young people on the platforms of presidential candidates.
So let me ask you a question to that. So if there's an issue, how do we get an issue that's important to somebody from around the way up to the folks at any level, per se?
Well, first you realize that somebody who's around the way probably has the same issues and challenges as somebody on the other side of town who's from another part of around the way.
Right.
So that means that there's probably an organization doing that work, right? So there are opportunities for young people to get engaged and involved and to, go out, and if it's, door knocking or raising money for a national organization that focuses on gun violence, like that's something that young people should be doing. And so there's some great organizations that do work, and I'd love to connect people with it if you're watching. She could read on Instagram, but you can always ask me questions. But it's important for people to know that they're just avenues and platforms to feed into.
Well, one of the goals for this new executive board of the DC Young Democrats is to sort of act as a convener and go throughout all 8 wards in DC, get those ideas, have meetings all throughout the city, and then translate that at the local level before council members, and both being proactive and saying, this is what we want you all to focus on. And then in terms of legislation that's introduced, being reactive in that sense and saying, hey, this should be tweaked this way, or we think you're missing this aspect of something. And then just to add to the issues, in terms of housing affordability and those types of things, a lot of young people in the district, when as they get older and they start to have families, for instance, and they want to buy a house and they want to stay here, by not focusing on the affordability aspects, a lot of them unfortunately have to leave DC. It's just simply too expensive. Right. And so that's something that we need to focus on, and that impacts not just young people, but older folks as well.
So you touched on something I think is really important, it being expensive to be
Affordable
here in DC.
housing.
Yeah.
How expensive is it to run a campaign?
Monetarily, it's damn expensive. But personally, if you are running a campaign, there's not a personal relationship that you have that you aren't reaching out to engage in this campaign. And I think, it takes a certain type of person who's willing to, really put your life on hold. If you're running a real campaign and you're serious about it, all of your friends, if they haven't done an event, need to be at your events. Like in your, it's all of your cousins, your aunts, uncles, hey, have you donated? Have you come to, did you talk to such and such? Did you tell Ray to donate? Did you have such and such come? So, I think that the personal investment is something that we don't realize when we see candidates, because they're really putting themselves on a platform to be judged. And for all intents and purposes, we are choosing who, is the best representative within that specific race. But you have to respect candidates. I've learned the hard way. It is not easy, and you really do have to be able to build a team, fundraise for a team, and sell a vision, and be committed to that vision also all at the same time, and prove it to people in an authentic way.
What advice would you give to someone who's considering running for office right now?
The advice I give is have a reason for why you're running and be as authentic as you can be. I think a lot of candidates, they're in it for the wrong reasons, and if you're not being true to yourself and true to the people that are the ones that are going to elect you, then it's just not worth it. So you really need to dig deep into your heart and come and discover why it is that you want to pursue public office, because it's a great calling. And that will help guide you through that process.
All right, we got about 60 seconds left. Give me some closing comments.
The DC Young Dems are really excited and committed to building out the Democratic Party within the youth in DC. We're excited about training young people on lobbying and how to run campaigns and how to run for office and how to be engaged in your community and advocate for the issues that matter. Please come join us, come out to our events, follow us on Facebook.
The 2020 presidential primary is just begun. It's going to continue being underway for the next year and a half, and it's a very exciting time to be a Democrat in DC and all throughout the country, and we want you to be engaged both locally and nationally, and we're a great platform. So please join us, show up to meetings. We'd love to have you.
What he said.
Thank you both for coming on the show. I think that this is an excellent opportunity with the DC Young Democrats for people to get involved, learn about the political process, and see how it impacts their lives. I didn't even know it existed, to be honest.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
and
sir.
for doing your work in the community.
I really appreciate it.
All right.
You're watching Rhythm of Justice Television. I'm your host, Salim Adolfo. We will see you all next week. Thank you.